Hi, I'm Dave Van Oss, Agricultural Markets Manager for Libro Credit Union. Libro is very excited to be this year's presenting sponsor for the Virtual Outdoor Farm Show. We truly hope that your farm business finds great value with this upcoming session.
Hello to everyone who's able to join with us today for this Glacier Farm Discovery panel that we're putting together on farm business management and farm business planning. My name is Tom Button. I'm editor of Country Guide magazine, and I have to tell you that I've been really looking forward to this program for some time now. We've got three experts who've got very different perspectives. They bring different strengths to us for our conversation today. And I'm really hoping that by the end of the day that you'll think that this was a broadcast that was not only interesting to listen to, but I think also hopefully valuable for you and helpful as well. So I mentioned that we've got three panelists. It's Heather Watson, Reg Dick, and Rob Hannum. And I'm going to be introducing all three of them more formally as we go through the day. But I wanted to start off by just setting the stage a little bit and talking about what our objectives are with this panel today. I'm not the only one who's been using a new phrase this year, that's had a new phrase that has been added to my vocabulary, and it's one that I really didn't expect when we started into 2020. And that phrase is the new normals. And I think probably, we use that a lot within our shop at Glacier Farm Media, and I expect a lot of you folks are using it, quite a bit too, because we're really wondering in 2020, after we've been dealing with COVID-19, how is life changing for us? What are the new normals going to be? Some of those new normals are normals of behavior. Are we ever going to get back to shaking hands again? Are we going to get together for meals? Are we going to go to the theater? Are we going to have family reunions and all those sorts of things? Or are we going to have to define new normals that govern how we interact with each other socially? But it's not just social, is it? I think a lot of us have also been seeing that farming is different in this environment too. The day-to-day farming things that we do, going to the elevator, getting the tractor fixed, all that sort of stuff, having the agronomists come on the property, all those things have new considerations with them as well. But the one that we're thinking of focusing on today has to do more with farm business planning. And it's not one that I think you would automatically assume it has a COVID reaction or has any reaction particularly with 2020 whatsoever. But we want to investigate this because there's, I think, a growing sense that perhaps, whereas the other changes that we've had to make because of COVID-19 are things that we've been forced into that maybe we didn't like. I would still like to go and shake people's hands. I'd still like to be able to go into the dealership and talk to whoever I want to and all that sort of thing. This might be an example with farm business planning where we're going to make a change because we see the benefits. COVID has given us a year when we're seeing the benefits that it can bring. Anyway, that's enough of me talking. At the very end of the panel, we're going to come back to this, and I'm going to ask each of the panelists, so they're on notice now, are we looking at moving into an agriculture where farm business planning is the new normal? So keep that in the back of your mind as we go through today. We're going to do this kind of in two halves. In the first half, I'm going to introduce each one of the speakers separately, and we're going to explore some of their own particular background and insights into farm business planning. And then after that, we're going to have a bit of a round table, and we'll go from there. So first up is Heather Watson. And let me give you the bio for Heather here. So Heather is somebody who's known to quite a number of you who are regular readers of Country Guide in particular. Heather's been very helpful to us and supplied a lot of content to us over the years. She's Executive Director of Farm Management Canada. So Farm Management Canada is based in Ottawa. It's a nonprofit that's dedicated to helping farmers develop their business capabilities for addressing this new world of farming. Heather presently serves as well as the Canadian representative on the International Farm Management Association Council, and she represents farm business management within a number of agricultural advisory groups across Canada. She's got her bachelor's from the University of Guelph and did a master's degree in England at the University of Warwick. And just a first free tip of the day to those of you who have signed on and haven't gone to the Farm Management Canada website to investigate the resources that they have on farm management and things that can assist farmers at addressing farm management questions. Make sure you drop by. You'll be glad you did. So Heather, back in your court, you've done some new work on farm business planning and some of the benefits that it might be able to bring to producers.
Yeah, so and thanks for having me as part of the panel discussion today. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because our organization was formed out of crisis. So following the 1980s, where commodity prices tanked and interest rates soared, that's where government and industry were looking at, well, how can we kind of, respond to this, unprecedented situation and learn how to respond better and build the capacity to succeed no matter what life has to throw at us. And so we were founded as an organization out of that crisis. And then, kind of today we're looking around here in 2020 with COVID-19 and kind of wondering, is this kind of the next crisis that may cause, a different appreciation for farm business management? So I have put together a few slides here that I will share. Nothing too crazy, but we have done a bit of research, and so I wanted to give you some numbers. So the benefits of business planning, first and foremost, we just finished a research project where we are exploring the connection between mental health and farm business management. We wanted to see how does one influence the other for the better or perhaps for worse. So sharing some of the insights regarding business planning specifically. We know that farmers are very stressed, but we also now know that business planning can help. So from our research in this Healthy Minds, Healthy Farms report is what we're calling it, we saw that, there still remains a pretty low adoption when it comes to business planning. And that's, that's consistent with the other research we've done in some of our dollars and cents studies, works like that. So it's kind of nice to see consistency between different studies. But what we see is 21% of farms indicate they're regularly following a business plan, and 48% are indicating they rarely or never do. And I'll get into those reasons in just a moment. But we also saw that farmers who use a written business plan tend to follow other business practices. So it's kind of like, an opening up to a new world of farm business management through this planning process. So they're doing more record keeping, adhering to budgets, benchmarking their performance, seeking training opportunities, and communicating about the future of the farm with those impacted. And if anyone remembers some of the work we did about 5 years ago in the dollars and cents study, those practices were the practices that we had top 7 practices of Canada's top farmers influencing financial performance. Those are pretty key in the fact that, business planning can kind of unlock those practices is a very significant finding for us. Also, in terms of mental health, of the farmers that do follow and have a written business plan, we found 88% of those said it's contributed to their peace of mind. So, they're able to sleep at night. They're able to, manage under greater amounts of stress because they have an idea of where they're going and they have kind of that foundational piece to reference back to when it comes to making tough decisions and responding to factors they perhaps, didn't anticipate or on the plus side did anticipate. And we also see that on the mental health side, especially, farmers who use a written business plan and reference that plan for decision making are more likely to adopt effective coping mechanisms. So we know that when we're stressed, sometimes it means less sleep, sometimes it means working longer hours, being away from home, sometimes shying away from social interaction, as well as things like getting emotional more often and being on the spectrum of perhaps irritable and angry, or withdrawing into yourself and not engaging with others. So we find that those who have a business plan are doing more effective coping mechanisms, such as, ensuring they're getting enough sleep. Going back and crunching the numbers is a key activity, and then going back and visiting the plan and seeing, okay, so things aren't going exactly how we thought they would, but where did we want to go again, and how can we kind of, about this ship into the right direction again? So as I was saying, we had 48% of farmers saying that they, rarely or never, use or follow a written business plan. And I thought it's important to talk about why. And I'm hoping that my colleagues here today can help us unpack this a little bit. And these reasons are quite consistent over all of our research. So the number one reason is always tends to be I'm succeeding without it. So it kind of begs the question to us, what does success look like? Are we measuring our success by family harmony, by the bottom line? Are we in the black? Are we in the red? Are we measuring it by how much yield or production we have? Or what's our measure for success? So it'd be interesting to kind of dig into that a little bit and say, are you succeeding? In what way? And could you be perhaps more successful with a business plan? So I think some of that has to do with our perceptions around business planning, as well as communicating the value. Also, some of the reasons include I lack the time to dedicate towards it. So there's certainly a perception that, business planning is that thing that you do over here and then the rest of the stuff is farming. So how can we kind of integrate business planning into your everyday thinking and your everyday activities so that it kind of comes to mind more often and you are saying, okay, I'm faced with a decision. Is that in the plan? Isn't it in the plan? What do I need to do? Also, that it requires constant updates. So, thinking about planning, of course, there's different types of planning. There's strategic planning, business planning, and operational planning. And so on the strategic side, you're thinking about what is the vision, the mission, the goals, kind of the grand big picture of this farm and where we want it to go, where we want to see it in, 10 years, 20 years, 100 years, whatever framework you want to use. But then it comes down to, the everyday, so the operational planning. So what does it mean we're going to do today and tomorrow and the next day? So I think maybe we need to help bridge that gap a little bit between kind of the big picture and the everyday, to kind of see that, yes, it requires updates, but, it depends kind of what level we're working on. Also, some of the responses were, I don't know what to include, which means we need to do a better job of communicating that and equipping our advisors to do the same. And it's an overwhelming task. And again, I think if we look to how can we, surround farmers with support systems and let them know that there's people out there to help them through this and there's skills development opportunities as well, maybe we can make some headway there as well. And so I've called this one Healthy Farms, Healthy Future, because this is where I'm just kind of going off of what we've seen, in my dozen plus years at Farm Management Canada, what we've seen in terms of the benefits of business planning in general. So getting back to, yes, it's good for our mental health, and we know that now, but we also see the business plan as, setting the farm up for the future. It's really that continuity plan. So we see it as the most effective tool for uniting the farm team around a vision as a guiding path to keep farms healthy for generations to come. So it's not just, something that you pay an advisor to do and it sits on the shelf, but it's something that you've come together as a family, as a farm team, as, people united around a vision and around values to decide what you want your future to look like and what you want it to look like together. So your plan kind of can provide that roadmap to success. And this is where the mental health piece kicks in, because it can be your trusty sidekick when stress runs high and times get tough and decision-making might become clouded. Also writing the plan down, because oftentimes we say, we have a plan, and it's all in here. Well, writing the plan down facilitates important conversations about the future of the farm and everyone's role within it. And it also gives everyone a chance to have a voice in creating that future. And then from our dollars and cents report from 2015, we know that adopting business practices like planning has been proven to increase profitability. So the difference between the bottom performing farms and the top performing farms was measured at 525%, which is another very good reason to invest in business planning. And then lastly, I just wanted to talk about changing the conversation. So these are some of the guiding principles that we derived from our Healthy Minds, Healthy Farm study. So, we think there's definitely maybe a misconception, changing perceptions about business planning. So we think, maybe when we're talking about planning as being proactive and getting ahead of the game, maybe we need to go back to what farmers respond to. And farmers respond to help me manage risk and help me manage uncertainty, which is creating so much stress. So knowing that risk management is a language that resonates with farmers, maybe we can use that intel to help talk about business planning and business practices from a risk management approach. And also, as I was just talking about, reaching out for help and working together to kind of, to take on this overwhelming task that we hear about and making time for planning, looking at a team approach. So building support teams involving advisors, but also family and peers can alleviate pressures from the decision making when you're kind of all in it together and you can bounce ideas off someone else. And then the preparedness approach. So I think this is probably the main one for me in terms of miscommunication about planning. So planning doesn't mean that you're predicting the future, because that would be obsolete pretty quickly in agriculture, but it means preparing for whatever may happen. And this links back to the risk management idea. So, looking at planning as, let's look at what would happen if everything went our way. What's our best case scenario? And then what's our worst case scenario? And maybe a middle road. What's our likely scenario? So no matter what happens, you've got some sort of, guiding path to get you through the good times, the bad times, and everything in between. So shifting those perceptions would be key for us, and that's what we're gonna work on going forward. And I'm really keen to hear what my colleagues have to say in some of their experiences.
Great, thanks very much, Heather. You said we were going to unpack that. There's a lot to unpack in there. And let me ask the first question first, just to make sure. So the Healthy Mind study is available on the website?
Yeah, so it's available, and we're plastering it all over social media. It's available on our website, fmc-gac.com, or our National Farm Business Management Resource Center, which is takeanewaapproach.ca.
Great, because we're not going to be able to unpack all of it today. There's a lot to dig into there, and so anybody who's listening, just dig in as you can. But the other thing that I wanted to point out, at Country Guide, we're always saying we need to do a better job of listening to farmers. So this was actually a go and listen to the farmers exercise from my point of view. And the number that really sticks out to me is 88% of the farmers told you, this wasn't 88% of the experts or 88% of the professors or something like that. 88% of the farmers who had business plans told you that the business plan made a real difference in their lives and in their ability to farm this year. And that's amazing. 88 is a very big number in any sort of survey work. That's very impressive. We'll come back to you again in just a minute, Heather. First, I wanted to invite in Reg Dick for his input next. Reg and his wife Anita are farmers from Manitoba. They took over the 1,900-acre grain and oilseed farm at Starbuck, Manitoba, and farmed that for over 40 years, starting to scale back in 2015. Reg was also 16 years on Keystone Agriculture Producers Executive and served as the transport chair there, and represented KAP in national transportation reviews. For the past 6 years, though, Reg has also been an instructor in the farm business management program for the ag diploma courses at the University of Manitoba, and that's particularly why we wanted him here today. Reg has been involved in the trenches, on the front lines, whatever metaphor you want to use, in talking especially to tomorrow's farmers, our young kids going to school, about farm management planning and why it's so essential that they start doing this. And we know that isn't always a natural thing for young farmers to think about. That's what they want to do. They want to grow crops. They want to raise livestock. Maybe they don't want to spend time on the book. So anyway, Reg is here today, and Reg is going to start off. Reg, if I can just have you maybe describe what it is that the program does, how it tries to achieve its objectives, and what the students end up thinking.
So thanks for having me today. And like you said, I work at University of Manitoba in Ag Diploma, and I work with a great team of instructors. We're all farmers of one kind or another that have been brought together to lend our experience to the program. So I've been teaching the second year diploma students in the farm business management class. And in that class, the students put together a business plan. Basically, in first year, they learn a lot of the, how to do loan schedules or financials, or they'll study other things from soils or marketing or whatever. But in second year, they put together the business plan. And so it involves a number of assignments. So it starts with objectives and hopefully identifying some strengths that they may have. And then we do some analysis work. So especially the previous year, but also going back further, what worked well, first of all, and then what could use improvement. So, if you want to improve your farm, and analyzing the year you've had, and just saying, what can we do better? So then they continue working on a business plan, which will involve agronomics. They basically, it's like a hub and spoke. The students will bring things from numerous other courses that they've taken. For example, the soils class, or weeds, or livestock courses, or marketing, and those sorts of things. And so they start working on this written business plan, and basically at the end of the year, they have a binder that has got all of these different elements in it. For example, like I said, they work on finance, marketing, HR, and all those things. We do some risk assessment. Are you able to withstand a shock? And I really took note of some of the things Heather was talking about. There was a lot of really interesting things in there that I thought, boy, we could really use some of those things in the courses that we teach. But obviously the ability to handle risk when farming is a very risky business, and there's lots of things come at you all the time. And if I could just comment, I've told the students it's maybe relatively easy to run a farm when you have good prices and good weather, and your equipment doesn't malfunction, and you don't have any HR problems. But that's not the reality of farming. And management really starts to kick in when some of these things start to go wrong, and that's why we need management. So carrying on, budgeting is a very large component. I am really big on knowing your cost of production. If you know your cost of production, that helps with so many other things. It might help with the ability to borrow money, or to just some of your marketing skills and those sorts of things, when to sell, and so cost of production is a huge element. And I think I've seen a statistic that about 50% of farmers really don't know their cost of production. So that's a really a big thing. We do some stress testing. What would happen if prices collapse, or if there's a weather event, or interest rates go up? We do some of those kind of things. The students also do a fairly major structural modification exercise, where they will look at, can they do some value adding on their farm? Might be a new enterprise, it might be expansion. In some cases, it might even be decreasing the farm size. And so we look at these structural modifications. And those structural modifications, they have to look at the financials, they have to look at HR, marketing, who are they going to market to? And we've seen some really interesting things come out of that. We've seen people trying to develop woodlots or gravel pits, or exporting bison to foreign countries. We've seen some really interesting things come out of that. Then the students will do a complete set of financial statements that need to be reconciled. That's part of their business plan. And then at the end of the second year, in the program I teach, they do a presentation to a panel of industry leaders and experts. And usually it's about 6 or 7 people in a room, challenging the students in their presentation, and then giving feedback. And when that is all said and done, the students usually have a pretty good sense of accomplishment. They feel they've really done something. And we've this is a high point of the program we have. We've heard from alumni and things. Do not take this out of the program, this business plan and the presentation of it. So I'll just stop there for now, and maybe you have some questions.
Yeah, we'll come back to some more questions in a minute, Rich, but I'm interested. That's got to be difficult for a 21-year-old or a 20-year-old young farmer wannabe to go and stand up in front of 6 people who are very deep in agriculture and say, here's my plan, and this is what I'm intending to do, and they're the people who have all sorts of expertise. That has to keep them awake for a night or two before they do that.
Yeah, we see a lot of apprehension, but we try to prepare them for it. So we do a mock presentation beforehand with one of the instructors. We tell them that they've been working for this for 2 years and they know it, and most students do very well at it. And when they are done, you see a real sense of accomplishment that, 2 years ago, I didn't know nearly as much as I do know, and I've been able to learn all these different facets of agriculture and bring them together and make this presentation.
That was the other question I was going to ask you, Reg. Presumably, they're coming to you without a lot of backgrounding in financial management.
So we have a real range. So roughly 2/3 of the students come from actual farms. And roughly 1/3 are female and 2/3 male. So it's, and the ones that don't come from farms, a lot of them have a farm connection. So maybe their grandparents farmed or uncle and they want to get into agribusiness or something like that. But we've also had some students come out of the city, and we had one student that started in a high school presentation talking about GMOs and how he challenged what he was being taught. And he came right out of the city, had no knowledge of agriculture, and he took the course and did really well.
But for the most part, your kids, they come, they hear what you're talking about. By the time they leave the program, they're ready to go home and meet the real world to a certain extent. Do you get feedback from them whether they're able to do that when they get back to the farm?
Yes, we've heard from alumni in many different ways, and even the panelists saying that these students, they really have learned a lot about agriculture and the sense of accomplishment. But also years later, we have students come back saying how much they learned and how much they appreciated that exercise in building the business plan.
The skill stays with them. Great. Listen, let me turn now to Rob Hannum and thank Rob for joining us. So Rob is client director with Synthesis Agri-Food Network in Guelph. And Rob has been a member of the agri-food community his entire life, growing up on a farm in the Guelph area before he started Synthesis. The Synthesis itself is a successful consulting and communications that includes local, national, and international clients. The reason I asked Rob to participate with us today is that I think all of us in agriculture are seeing that agriculture has opportunities for those who treat it as a business, and sometimes it doesn't matter where we get our insights from. That we don't only have to get insights from other farmers. Sometimes we can look at how some of the businesses around us are performing, what things make a difference in their own performance, and how we can maybe adapt some of what they're doing to our own lives. And Rob is instrumental in working with a number of these clients, especially in the agri-food area. And I know from having previously talked to Rob that actually business planning is a key to the success of these firms, and it's a key to how it is that you deal with them and help them bring their companies along. And Rob, I was hoping you could take us through that a bit.
Great, thanks, Tom. Thanks for the opportunity. And thanks for putting me after, because I can pick up on some of the great comments that Heather and Reg made. So again, Rob Hannum, I get to work with agriculture organizations, agribusiness or food company clients, as well as farm families. And I really like strategy. I really like business planning. My mind's kind of wired that way. So it comes naturally to me. But I also, it's something like I'm a business owner as well as the farm, so I think relate in some way to the farm families that I have worked with or that are viewing this broadcast. Business planning brings a lot of benefit. When I think of, there's kind of 4 points I'll make, I guess, and then refer back to some of the comments we've heard. For me, the act of business planning, it's likely more common outside of farming, like with agribusiness or with other businesses, than it is with farm businesses. And Heather mentioned only 21%. So I wrote down the number, 21% farms have a business plan. It's a pretty low number. Outside of farming, it would be a higher number. But farms or businesses with employees, I think would have a higher number as well. And that the trick there is when you've got employees, you really need to communicate to make sure they're on the same page, moving in the same direction, right? You don't want to be distracted. So farms with employees tend to be more likely to have a written business plan because it's a communication tool. So that's, of course, one of the things. So the first thing is the business plan helps you set the path forward. And Heather talked about that long-term vision, 10 years, 20 years in the future, and where are we headed? The business plan helps you set that path forward. The second thing is about goal setting. Well, we all know that we do better with goals. You manage what you measure. Sports teams are getting better. It's because they've got a goal in mind. In business, we set goals and sales targets, and you're more likely to achieve them. So a plan helps you set those goals. Now, we all know that some things can get in the way, and 2020 is a great example of something that came from out of the blue that's really affected our business plan. Communicating with the team is something I mentioned already, and that's a really important part for me. And I hope we can talk more about that as we go through the session here today. And the last one is contingencies. So planning contingencies. Reg, you said stress test it. We stress test the plan. We say, could it stand a shock? And likely people are thinking about, if interest rates went up 1%, what would my monthly payments be like, and could I make it? That's the right idea. What are those things that could change? So maybe it's an increase in market price or a decrease in market price. Maybe it's a change in interest rates. I'm sure food companies today are planning grocery, retail, or food service restaurants. Oh my gosh, what if I only had one? What if I only sold to restaurants and they closed because of COVID, or they close again because of the second wave that people are talking about? Planning contingencies makes you better prepared for those things that we don't see coming. And so whether it's a war room where you're planning out different ideas, whether it's contingencies, whether it's scenario planning or stress testing, as Reg said, Heather mentioned it well in her points off the top, where she said that farmers felt better prepared when they had a business plan and were better able, had a improved mental health or state of mind because they had a plan that had contingencies. So an analogy I'll give would be like, hypothetically, let's say we're planning for an animal disease situation. And we know there have been outbreaks of infectious diseases in the past. So veterinarians and specialists would get together prior to that as we prepare for any of those animal diseases. And they get together and plan out, what if the disease comes in this way or comes in that way? And they run through a bunch of scenarios. If the disease actually happens, it's likely not scenario A, B, it's not exactly the way C planned out, but we're much better prepared to respond because we've already walked through scenario A, scenario B, scenario C. We're much better prepared as business owners and managers to respond because we've got a bunch of potentials already figured out, already planned out, who's going to do what. So just that act of planning really makes us better prepared. It leads to healthier state of mind, I think, is what Heather was saying. And I agree with that. So, and just again, to come back to one of her numbers, and it stuck with you, it stuck with me, Tom, 88%. Yeah. That was the number of farms who have a business plan and say they've benefited from having that plan. So path forward, goal setting, communications, and contingencies are the four things that really jump out to me.
Rob, I'm going to just jump in briefly with a comment that, we've all been talking about resiliency this year, haven't we? That's a word that's been getting an awful lot of use. And I really like the definition of resiliency that says that it's two things. Resiliency is, yes, it's the ability to take a punch or whatever. It's the ability to take a knock and be able to keep on functioning. But it's also the ability to respond to opportunity, isn't it? Resiliency isn't only picking yourself up off the mat, it's getting back into the fight again. And, business planning figures into that, I would expect, for the whole range of your clients, Rob.
For sure. Think about companies today that had already started down the path of online transactions. right? And some would have said, "Oh no, we don't do online transactions. It's cheaper just to mail our statements, or to get checks mailed to us and put them in the bank, or no, we don't need an online store because then we have to have our inventory online. That's difficult." But think of the other companies who started down that path already. They were much better prepared to respond when COVID occurred. And some are taking advantage of that, building market share or lowering their cost of doing business by moving to more online systems because they were partly there already. And they're just saying, no, you know what, we're just going to take orders online. We don't need to have our sales rep drive to every farm like we did and try to, with 5 other sales reps trying to get the order. We've got a nice online system. We'll do more work by phone. We'll have a portal where our customers can come in online. So some businesses are definitely taking advantage of opportunities, and farms can do that too.
Rob, I expect that many of the clients that you deal with, I mean, they're kind of amenable to the farm business plan, or to the business plan message anyway, or you probably wouldn't be meeting with them in the first place. They wouldn't be making time for you. But that said, they also, it's going back to what Heather had said about the reasons why farmers may be reluctant to get too involved in business planning. It takes time. We're dealing in a market that is volatile, and change comes at us that we can't plan for from different directions and whatnot. You must hear that from some of the companies and the associations that you deal with, and yet and they also have to allocate resources that they have a finite amount of for this. What do you hear from them in terms of is it worth the effort that they put into it after they've gone down this path?
Oh, certainly it's worth the effort. They're much better prepared. Now, typically a company or an organization that I'd be working with has a number of people, right? There's a board of directors or there's a management team. So it's groups of people. So you need to get people on the same page, going down the same path. And sometimes it's helpful to have an outsider like me come in and help with that process, bring new ideas, make sure everyone gets a voice in that discussion, or just the discipline of, yes, we're going to do it because Rob's coming. So we do it, and then I follow up with them, every year to get the plan updated. So part of it's just helping them with the mechanics of it, but definitely the companies benefit from the activity of planning and from writing it down. There's 2 things here. The activity of planning is gold, and every farm business can do that. I know as business owners, farmers watching the broadcast, like you, I think about my business every morning. I'm worried about risks every morning. My risks might be a little different than your risks. Yours might be bigger or even more out of your control, whether commodity prices, trade deals in China, who tweeted what that changed some, there's all kinds of things that have come at us out of the blue. 2019 and 2020 have been just, big as far as new things and changes in direction. You're much better prepared to respond to those. There's huge value. And when I think of the dollars and cents study that Heather referred to, that's just one example where farmers had a much higher financial performance when they had these plans in place. And that was measured through financial ratios, so actual dollars of how the farm's performing.
Yeah. Heather, can I go back to you at this point, because we've talked about that 21% number a couple of times, and we've talked about some of the past research you've done. I'm just wondering, do we know where that 21% number is going now? And do we know a little bit more about what it reflects? Like, is that 20% of what we might call commercial farms, or is there a large percentage of the big commercial farms that are already planning? Can you give us a little bit more background there?
Yeah, so I'll give you kind of 2 little nuggets here of insight. So the one is, you can find business practices across the board. So it's not, one commodity is doing better than another. There's top managers and bottom managers across the board, across regions, you name it, kind of thing. But we just did, actually the dollars and cents study, we just did an update, and not looking at the financial performance difference, but looking at the adoption over the past 5 years. And has the adoption of these practices changed? And what are kind of the the barriers to the adoption, so digging in a little bit deeper, and what are some of the drivers to adoption. And so I guess the bad news, I suppose, and maybe this will change now that we're in COVID response and looking at what can we do different. But the bad news is, for I think it was 80% of the business practices, the adoption rates have gone down. So the 21% represents from our Healthy Minds, Healthy Farms. But I think the number, which was pretty close in this dollars and cents study update, was closer to 18%. And so we're actually doing less business planning, if you can believe it, less record keeping, less HR planning, less transition planning. I'm not sure why that is. A lot of times we see that farmers will turn to business management practices when times get really tough. So maybe if we look at the past 5 years, not counting this past year, maybe it's been relatively good for farmers, and now there's going to be, maybe a switch is flipped. And they say, actually, you know what? I wasn't as prepared as I thought I was. We've seen the repercussions, because you'll remember they don't plan because they're succeeding without it. Whereas maybe when we look back at 2020 and say, okay, how successful were you? How are you measuring that success? And, is there something that you can do? Like Rob talked about, the contingency planning, just, even if you can't gain more control over things like weather and commodity prices, how can you control your response to it, or your ability to pivot your business, your ability to respond to those pieces? But moving forward, looking at it from the other side, where, we came out of crisis, and I'm thinking, if there's any silver lining to all of this, it's perhaps a greater appreciation for, those farms that were ready to, turn on a dime, like Rob said, and have online delivery and have, their CSA functioning through online and things like that. They're seeing opportunity, whereas others are struggling to survive. So, maybe we can look at the silver lining in terms of, it's a good time to reflect on the value of business practices and maybe making a little bit more headway, so that in 5 years' time, that number 21 jumps to, maybe 30, maybe 35. But I think another thing I just wanted to point out too is, oftentimes we're asked, well, is it just farmers? Are farmers just, really bad at this stuff? What we find is it's very comparable to other family businesses. So kind of, working with your family, employing your family, sometimes you're not seeing them as employees and you're not seeing them as part of the team. And that can kind of lead to, farming practices because this is what we've always done, because we enjoy it, because we love it. And it's hard to make that transition to, we're going to treat the farm like a business. And now what does that mean for the relationships I have with the people I'm working with? Because all of a sudden, there's bosses, there's authorities, there's accountability. And how do we make that transition into kind of looking at our farm as a farm business, as opposed to, the family farm? There seems to be a bit of a piece of contention there.
Mm-hmm. Reg, let me come to you and ask for your reaction to that. The fact that we may actually be seeing some reduction in the uptake of farm business management tools. I have to tell you, I really would have thought it was going the other way. I would certainly have thought that it was going the other way in terms of an awful lot of our incorporated farms have gone, and they started absorbing some of these processes just as a part of how they do things. And we know that there's been growth in that sector, and we've seen more multi-generational farms. Kids going back to farms, your students, Reg, going back to farms and saying, I'm not going to do it the way you did it, Dad. I'm not going to sit around and wait, until I'm 55 before you tell me what the money looks like. I want to be involved from the beginning. Gee, I would, so I'm a bit surprised. Reg, talk to me about this.
Well, the last point, it's a really fine line. And so for a student to go back to the farm and say, we're going to change things or do things, and we warn the students, you have to really tread that carefully, because the older generation or generations have a lot of the, they've got the power really. So, they've put their sweat and equity in for a long time, and they've built the farm up. And if you're going to come from university and say, we're now going to change things and do it this way, that's a very fine line to tread. but we really encourage students to work with family. And so I can't remember who it was. Someone mentioned communication earlier. I think it was Rob. But communication being so important that, you know, you have family meetings, you have discussions, and maybe as a student, you can't say we want to go here, but maybe you can make suggestions. Maybe you can say, you know, is there room for all of us to have input? Is there room for us to be a part of this? And I think Heather also pointed that out, that farms that kind of work together and have this overarching view and objective and business plan, they're the ones that are more likely to be successful because they're all on the same page, right? So that's kind of, so it's a very fine line to say that a student should go back and say, we have to do a written business plan, but I think they bring some of those tools back with them. Budgeting is a huge thing that, to be honest, a lot of farmers don't budget very carefully. And if students can take that with them, and I've used the example that in class, I heard somebody from the University of Minnesota, I think it was, talking about how the average return on corn in Minnesota over a long period of time was 10 cents US per bushel. If you can raise that by 5 cents, you increase your profit margin by 50%. And so, you know, it's not a very big amount to increase your margin from 10 cents a bushel to 15, but you've increased your profit by a huge amount. So those are the kind of things that we talk about. A little bit better management style, better management preparation, bit better budgeting, and better analysis. You can hopefully do some of those things.
Rich, are many of your students going back to a situation where their parents are giving them a certain acreage for them to, or they not giving them title to it, but giving them that land and say, okay, you grow the crop, you know, there, I need to see a budget, how you're going to do this, how you're going to work out the dollars and cents on this, and you know, the profit from that is yours to invest, et cetera. Is that something that you would support, and are you seeing it very often?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I got into agriculture and farming, and was in that method. And so I think there's a real range of methods out there. Some they're held back until the parents are ready to walk off the farm, and then they're told, here's the farm, right? But I think the best way is to incorporate those students and young farmers in an early age, get them in the decision-making process. I think that's very, very important. And yes, they will make mistakes, but all the old farmers have made mistakes as well. So it's, you know, it's learning as you go. But I think the important thing is that students and young farmers are incorporated into the farm at an early age and allowed to make decisions, allowed to maybe manage a portion, a small area or whatever, and, you know, whether so many head of cattle or so many acres or whatever it is. And I think that's a really smart business plan.
Rob, if I can come back to you again for a second, and I'd be interested in everybody's comments on this. Rob, you were talking about communication. And that's one of those words that, you know, you can feel some people's skin crawl a little bit when words like communication's coming up. I mean, it's not real. It's kind of, you know, touchy-feely. And do I really want to go involved? Oh no, is this going to be another one of those sessions where I have to do a vision statement or something, you know? And what good is that'll just sit on the shelf, and I'll never come back to that. And you know, in terms of who I am as a farmer, well, geez, am I not just the same as every other farm in the countryside? You know, why do I need to be able to tell somebody that? Talk to me a little bit about that, Rob, because there is that touchy-feely concern about it, isn't there?
So communications to me is vitally important. It's not always about a vision statement. Your example is a vision statement. Some farm families I've worked with latch onto that and do a great job. And it's really not the end product, which is the sentence about their vision. It's the discussion and dreams and hopes that they talk about as a family differently than they would normally talk at the dinner table or in the shop or in the barn after chores. So it's a different context, and hopefully, you know, the family kind of sets up and is more thinking about the future. So it can be a real positive, invigorating exercise for the family, both those involved directly in the farm and maybe those, you know, relatives that are not directly working on the farm. So spouses, children. So having everyone involved, I think, is a real positive. But getting back to the business plan and communications, there's lots of ways, right? So there's two parts to it. One is like writing it down. For me, as just thinking it through, it helps me clarify the idea, right? I've got ideas floating in my head. I'm sure, people, farm business owners watching the broadcast, you've got ideas, you've got a strategy. You do. Every farm listening to this broadcast, you've got a strategy. But have you talked about it, actually shared it with your spouse, your children who are about to take over the farm, your banker, your insurance advisor, all of those specialists, your nutritionist, your veterinarian? So there's lots of advisors that can help you. I've mentioned a few: banker, lawyer, accountant. Writing the plan down helps you more efficiently communicate with them. And so often I say, write your plan down, send it to your advisors, right? So your accountant knows where you're headed. They might see something, from a tax standpoint, because they know where you're headed, that they would change now and work it in over a few years that they wouldn't if they didn't know where you're headed. So that's just a simple example. Lawyer, same thing. Veterinarian, building, if you're a building contractor, you're expanding the barn, if they know where you're headed, they might change a few things for expansion or not. So different things to keep in mind. Maybe your strategy is to be diversified and remain flexible so you can weather the storms or the shocks that come. So that's maybe a different barn design, or a different, I'm going to lease, not buy my equipment. Like, there's all kinds of potential business decisions that come out of knowing sort of that path forward. So back to communications, it's about talking to your family. It's about talking to your key employees. It's about talking to your advisors. And when you're talking and sharing, you're learning as well. I want the business owners listening to the broadcast to make sure it's not just you talking, it's also you listening. I struggle with that sometimes, but I really learn a lot when I stop talking and I listen, and I come away better off for it. So.
Great. Heather, let me come back to you on this topic as well, because it's an important one. I think with some of our earlier conversation, we focused a little bit on the financial projections that you can have with the business planning process, and et cetera. But part of it is this whole headspace thing, isn't it? I hear from more farmers today that, what I need to do is I need to be able to find a way that I can do more things without me having to do more things, because I'm already totally tapped out in terms of my time commitment, So one of the things that falls off is farm business planning, but maybe farm business planning opens the door to be able to manage your farm in a way that you can do more things, without tying up more of your own time. Talk to me a little bit more about this whole area, about how communication feeds maybe into the look at the farm overall.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question, and something that we've seen come up like time and time again. We ran this series of workshops a few years ago called Bridging the Gap, and it was focused on, how to kind of get unstuck in those farm transition conversations. And so it invited, members from, the same farm to come into these workshops. So we had moms and dads and daughters and sons and in-laws and stuff like that. And as much as, we wanted to focus on, business management and process and it inevitably always turned to conversation. And just, I don't know how to change the conversation on the farm. Like, we can have a great dinner. We can have, we meet every morning and talk about what we're going to do. But how do we change that conversation to something that's a little bit more business oriented, a little bit more professional, and speaking to some of the things that Rob and Reg pointed out. So I think, there's tons and tons of tools out there, but I think, the communication side, it takes a while, and there are so many components in it because we all communicate differently. We listen differently. We listen for different things differently. So even, I've heard of a lot of farms looking at, conducting personality tests, whether it's Myers-Briggs or Colby, et cetera, to kind of better understand, how am I approaching this situation? How are others perhaps approaching? And how does that understanding, help us kind of see how different we are, but also how we can play key roles on the farm. So back to business planning. Business planning lets us look at, what do we want to achieve, and having, everyone a part of that voice and contributing to that idea. And then also looking at, okay, well, who is the best positioned to do this, to do that, who's the best position to lead the business planning and the HR and the financing. So oftentimes when we give presentations or talk about business management, we talk about, doing your best and hiring the rest. So, it doesn't have to, I always talk about how, the whole, the jack of all trades, it's not feasible anymore. It can't survive on the farm. You need to figure out, what are you really good at? What do you enjoy doing? And everyone has to be part of that exercise on the farm to kind of have people, sometimes you just default position and give your son this job, give your daughter this job without really understanding, is that what feeds their passion? Is that what they really want to do? And is that how we're going to get the best out of what they have to contribute to the farm in whatever way? So it's just slowing down a bit and using the business planning process to really understand, what role is everyone looking to play on the farm, and how can we use that to build an awesome team to help us achieve our goals? And if we don't have the people on our team to, contribute X, Y, Z, well, maybe we can look outside of the farm. Maybe we can look to advisors and things like that. And in most cases, you are going to have to kind of reach outside of the farm for, like legal advice and financial advice and things like that. But there also might be some hidden gems within the farm. So going through the business planning process, like Rob talked about, facilitates these conversations that we typically take for granted. And we assume, like you said, Tom, everyone's just like us. Everyone thinks the same. Everyone wants the same. And that's becoming more and more clear that that's not the case. Because it's interesting when we look at our dollars and cents study update, something that kind of surfaced for the first time in terms of driving business planning and business practices. Of course, profitability, of course, managing risk, of course, transition planning, but family harmony made the list for the first time, as well as managing stress and anxiety. So there's something to that, and I think we need to pay careful attention to it.
I'm just going to keep on coming. Rob showed the number too. That 88% number just hits me in the eyes every time I see it. And so I understand why people would be feeling, a bit queasy. I'm going to talk to family about this. You know what? The thing is, 88% of the people, 88% of the farmers who did it said it was the right thing to do, right? That's pretty impressive. So listen, I said that I was going to come back, and at the very end, and I was going to ask you a question, and I don't know what the answer is going to be now. Are farm business plans going to become part of a new normal? Are we moving in that direction? What's your take? So each of you gets a sentence or two to cap this off. Heather, we'll take you in the order that we interviewed you in the first place. Heather, it's your turn.
So answer is twofold. I would hope that the situation we find ourselves in today is an indication that we need to invest in business management practices. And I also think that the data we have from the mental health study in particular shines new light on the benefits of business planning, and we can use that to really unpack, the farmers that say 41% of farmers say I'm succeeding without it. We can kind of throw that back a bit and open that up and say, are we succeeding? And what does success look like? How are we measuring success? And have a different conversation around that, as well as bringing in that conversation about risk management again. So, getting away from the idea that business planning is predicting the future, it's your crystal ball and nobody has one. It's more about being prepared for whatever happens and looking at what are all the risks and opportunities out there, and how can I position myself to respond the best and take a proactive approach to maintain, prosperity, success, family harmony, all that wonderful stuff. So hoping that we will see a change for the better. The timing is right.
There's a hopeful answer. Reg, how about you?
Well, again, I guess I'm not sure if farmers will go to written business plans, but I want to pick up on just one brief thing that both Rob and Heather did say, is that there's a trend and maybe a need to go for expert advice when we need it. And I think that might be part of the business plan. And if I could add just one wrinkle in there, I think it's important to maybe get mentorship, especially for younger farmers. If there's an older family member that may not be actively farming, but has a wealth of knowledge and mentorship, or a neighbor, or even someone your own age. And I know most of the years I was farming, I would bounce ideas off my neighbor, and they weren't always good ones, but at least you have that second thought, that discussion. And I think that's really important, to be able to talk to someone about your ideas and your planning and things like that. And so I would really encourage that. Now, just the one risk is you don't want to pick someone who's pessimistic. You want to pick someone who's an optimist and who can lead you in the right direction. But I'll leave it at that.
Great. And Rob, if I can throw the question to you then.
Yes, I think definitely we'll see more business planning in the future, because younger farmers are good at it. They're good with the tools, spreadsheets, Word documents, computers, cell phones. You don't need paper and a binder to do a business plan. You can do it with an app or with notes on your phone. So I definitely see younger farmers being more interested in doing this, and it comes easier because they're used to these kinds of tools. I see bankers asking young farmers for more, right? You've got ratios, you've got covenants, the promises in your bank loan. I see that, younger farmers have higher debt. So I think there's a generation that are, sort of my age maybe, or later in the farming stage, and says, well, I've made it 20 years. Like, why am I going to do this now? I would say to you, if you've got a new generation coming, or you want a new business venture with another farm, something in the future, if there's a big change coming, business planning can help you. But definitely I see more of it happening in the future. More use of advisors, more use of planning. I think younger farmers also want balance in their life. They want to take the weekend off and go to a cottage. I see, after spraying's done this year on Twitter, I see farmers taking some time off at the cottage, or the family camping for the weekend. Awesome. Maybe that, wasn't as common with some farm families who, head down all summer in the past and worked every day. So if you want more balance, then that's great. You need to professionalize the farm. And that means having farm meetings, as opposed to just casually talking about it every day because you're all there every day. Have a meeting every Monday or every Thursday, and save up the business items. Do we buy a new combine or not? Save it up till Thursday for the meeting. Talk about it then. Decide, or decide if you need more information, and then move on. Don't just let these decisions hang out every day. So yeah, I see a positive future. I see people professionalizing their farm business more and more, especially among young farmers and farms with employees. So I think that's the path forward, and I'm excited about it.
Great. Well, that's a beautiful way for us to end this conversation with, I think, all of us recognizing that there are challenges ahead, that this isn't a path that comes easily or naturally to everyone. But farming is a business about making decisions, isn't it? Farm business planning is about making better decisions. So you can tell where my vote is on this score too. Listen, thanks to everyone for joining us today. My thanks to Heather, to Reg, and to Rob for lending your insights into this. And thumbs up to everyone. Have a great summer.